Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the FPA webinar series. I hope everybody's safe and warm. And if you're living someplace warm where you don't have a foot of snow on the ground, send some melting energy up here because in the Northeast it's pretty miserable right now. It's cold and icy. So my name is Ann Simnecki, and I'm the Secretary of the Board of Directors of the Facial Pain Association. I'm also co-editor of the book recently published called Facial Pain, a 21st Century Guide. I know many of you have seen this before. This year, our webinars will be based on articles from the book, and we've invited some of the chapter authors to come and speak with us. So tonight, we'll be talking with Dr. Deborah Barrett, and on February 25th, we'll be talking with Dr. Heckmat, and Dr. Brown will be speaking with him on how to communicate with your doctor. And that's looking like it's going to be a very interesting webinar. On March 22nd, we'll turn to mindfulness, and Allison Feldman, our CEO, will be talking to Dr. Jonathan Greenberg, who's with I have a long name here, the Harvard Integrated Health and Research Institute. And he's a research psychologist, and he'll be talking to us about mindfulness. We have just a few announcements before we get started. We will continue to offer webinars and other virtual events during the Corona health crisis. And to learn more about these, please visit our website. It's www.facepain.org. You can view recordings of past webinars, and you'll learn about upcoming events. Our virtual support groups are up and running, and they're also accessible through the website. Well, they're not accessible through the website. You can sign up for them on the website and you'll be sent a link to them. And they're open to everyone affected by neuropathic facial pain. You can contact the office or visit our website if you have any questions or need more information about these upcoming events. Another announcement is Sunday, February 28th is Rare Disease Awareness Day. And as you all know, trigeminal facial pain is a rare disease. So join us as we raise awareness about rare conditions faced by the neuropathic facial pain community. You can help spread awareness by visiting our Facebook page and we have a frame, you know what they look like on Facebook, and it's the FPA Rare Disease Day frame, and you can add it to your profile picture. We're going to post facts about rare diseases that you can share with your friends throughout the month of February. And we invite you to share your own facial pain journey on Rare Disease Day, the 28th, and be sure to tag the Facial Pain Association when you do that. Just a reminder, we're able to provide programs like this because of the support of our generous donors. So please consider making a gift to the FPA and helping us continue to bring these wonderful broadcasts to you. And again, you can do that on our website, www.facepain.org. If you're interested in the book and you haven't secured a copy for yourself already, between now and February 12th, our publisher is offering a 15% discount. And again, you can link to the publisher through our website. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Deborah Barrett. She's a PhD and clinical associate professor, and she is going to continue with her own introduction and tell you how she got into this work and talk to you about can I say this?
Dialectical approach to working with pain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, dialectical approach to working with pain. And she's wonderful. I've read a few of her articles, and I think this will be very useful because, you know, it's important for us to be in control of our situation. And we can't always control the pain, but we can control how we feel about it. And this is one more way to achieve that. So, Dr. Debbie, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Anne, very much. So I give a lot of talks. I've given some version of this talk to medical folks, to students, to clinicians. Sometimes I give like a 5-minute version. Sometimes I give a 2-day version. So I will just see what happens today. I know we have an hour in total. I'd love to keep space for questions. I also would love to invite you all, if you're able to type things into the chat as I go along, it's really helpful for me. I know in theory that there are people out there who are watching this at the same time as we're doing this, but pretty much I'm just looking at my computer and a little picture of Anne. And so, you know, it'd be fabulous to get feedback as I go, if you'd like. So you can type in hi if you want and see if I can see that, or and see if it's, and will I get to see a chat scroll?
I can see it. I don't know if you can, but there is a little chat
Has anybody
arrow.
written hi yet?
Just Allison.
Okay.
Okay.
And so I think what I'll do is I will jump into, I know you're going to have a talk on mindfulness in a couple, I think 2 talks from now. I think I'll just start us off with a little mindfulness activity, just something to kind of help us settle in, and then we can come back from there. So let me invite you in this moment to get yourself as comfortable as you can with whatever you've been doing. See if you can just set things down. Set things down, maybe empty your hands and set things down, just whatever might be going on in your mind. See if you can just give yourself a little bit of space and just notice it. And maybe start by focusing on your ordinary breath. So you might notice the sensation of the air as it comes in, the rise and fall of your chest and your belly. And with each out breath, see if you can have a sense of your mind and your body relaxing on that out breath. And as you put your attention to your breath, not trying to change it, just noticing it, seeing what it feels like as the air comes in and out. Oftentimes, just by noticing how you're breathing, just noticing the air coming in and each out breath, you may notice that you're slowing down just a little bit, being a little more deliberate by putting your attention on the breathing. And as you do that, I invite you to notice areas where maybe there's some tension. Shoulders are a big one. So as you breathe in and as you exhale, allow yourself to soften in your shoulders with each breath, in no hurry at all. Maybe bringing your attention to your forehead, allowing your forehead to soften with each breath. Notice you can put your attention on your temples. You don't need to feel them with your hands or look in the mirror. You know just where they are. And with each breath, allowing yourself to soften your forehead, your temples, your cheeks. With each breath, noticing how easy it is to clench up, and then by bringing your attention, slowing down and softening, seeing if you can allow yourself to relax, and then to relax even a little more deeply with each breath. Noticing your jaw very lightly, letting the air in and out, allowing your jaw to soften, your face to relax. The most neutral way of holding your face you can. Noticing with each breath that you can relax even a little bit more, soften a little bit more, opening your hands, allowing yourself to feel connected and supported by whatever you're sitting on, whatever's holding you up. Maybe noticing your feet on the floor and what that feels like. So at your own speed, at your own pace, maybe allow yourself just to notice your breath for another few breaths with me. And of course, this is something you can always come back to because your breath is always there, allowing yourself to soften with each breath. And then I invite you to come back. If your eyes have been closed, you might just gently, as you're ready, no hurry at all, adjust to the light in the room, wherever you are. And if you'd like to share something on the chat, just note anything you noticed, maybe a word or a phrase, whatever that might be. Love to hear from you. Anything you noticed. Okay, that was really relaxing, was one response, right? And so sometimes just giving yourself some time to be intentional and allowing yourself to relax can have that effect. Anything else? Anybody else? Anne, do you see anything?
Not yet. I do see my comment. And that was quite relaxing. Felt really good. And viewers, please put your comments in the chat, and the chat is a place for your questions too. Because if we get lots of questions, I will.
And if you open the, there's a panel that is called
Attendees?
the question pane. And if you click on that, you can see all the comments.
Oh, okay.
It looks like a little question mark inside of a speech bubble.
Okay, I'll find it.
Unfortunately, I can't see any feedback people have shared. And if you see something, just join in and let me know, okay? And I'll go ahead and move along.
Okay.
So the word that that Anne was trying to say before is dialectical, and this is the approach that I come from. And this fancy word, it pretty much just means it's not all or nothing. And I think you know, it's pretty easy these days to find a lot of all or nothing thinking, especially I think in our country. And you know, it's just a habit people have. And you think about how that's relevant is that in the dialectic, it holds space for both sides. So something can be all or everything. So we could say like, you know, everything right now, everything's okay, right? Because I'm sitting here, I've got clothing, I've got a place to sit, my electricity's on, everything's okay. And at the same time, like nothing's okay, right? It's like really easy to think of things that are just not going okay. And so with a dialectic, it's not trying to convince yourself that either everything's okay or nothing's okay. It's bringing in that and to say that, well, maybe something's okay, right? It's not just the average of them, it's holding space for both. So another example would be that, you know, I'm suffering. And I know that Anne said in the beginning I was going to introduce myself, and I realized I hadn't done that yet, but I really wanted to start with a mindfulness just to kind of settle into the space and allow other folks to do the same. So suffering is something that I'm familiar with because I'm a person in a body, right? We all suffer sometimes. I'm a clinical social worker, and I'm also a person who's lived for many years with chronic pain. Because it's been so many years and I've had lots of different experiences, I kind of joke with my clients, and we call this a gift sometimes, that I've had many different gifts. So I understand lots of different kinds of pain from my own experience. Again, one person can't know what another person experiences, and at the same time, there may be a lot of similarities. So somebody may have suffering, and they also might be, say, capable, right? Or they may be, suffering, and so just because I'm able to do something, right, and I'm sure people can relate to this, doesn't mean you're not at the same time maybe having a really difficult time. And so oftentimes we try to choose between them. We think, okay, if I'm doing something, that means, oh, I must not be suffering right now. And so with the dialectic, the idea is that you can be capable. So suffering can be happening and be real and true, and I can also be capable. And so that opens up another space. What if I can have pain and difficulties, and I also can come and give a talk and manage in lots of different parts of my life? They can both be true. It opens up space for something more. So you can have pain, and you can have, and if I could see your chats, I would ask you all to type in words. What else might you have? You may have pain, and you may have joy, right? You may have love. You may have family. You may have a strong will. You may have, right? So all these things can coexist. And
Debbie,
then,
you want me to read some of those?
sure, absolutely.
So fear, happiness, determination, pain, resilience, pain in life, goals, friends, excitement, anger.
Nice. So you guys already get this dialectic idea, right? So if you can have pain and you can also have friends and joy and life and light and other things that you said, it opens up another space, right? You don't have to negate one. It opens up this middle path. And in the middle path is a place for more flexibility. And so when you're not rooted in all or nothing, it has to be all one way or another. Rather, it can be something, and it can also be something else. And that opens up this middle path. And so the central dialectical space that the tradition that I come from as far as being a psychotherapist is called dialectical behavioral therapy. That's what the DBT is there. And the central dialectic there is between change and acceptance. And so it's a both and. It's not rather you either need to change or you need to accept. And so when you think about it, when you have pain and you go to your medical provider from the biomedical model that we have, which one do people, is it more of a change that you're looking for when you go to the doctor from the medical model, right? Or is it more a place of acceptance? What are we going for when we show up with pain? So Anne, are folks typing in?
Yes, yeah, I'll just read stuff out to you, Debbie. You could always just cue me and I'll read stuff out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So relief, change, both, change,
Right.
going to quote unquote fix it, change, always change.
You got it.
Relief,
Okay.
hope.
I have a feeling, Anne, that folks could like give a lot of my talk already, right? Because you know what it's like. So you go in with pain and you're looking for change, and the doctor's there to give you change. I heard some people also say both, and I think that's really important. We're going to get to that. So what happens is you go and you're like, okay, we're going to treat it, we're going to fix it, we're going to relieve it, we're going to diagnose it, we're going to give you what you need so it goes away. Well, what happens, and if you're on this call, probably you know this all too well, is that sometimes the pain persists, right? It's still there. And so the doctor eventually might say, well, we try to change it, we hit it with change, and now, well, you know what, change didn't work. So now we're going to throw this one out and say, you have to accept it. And I'm holding my hand out like it's a stinky thing. It's like, you have to accept it. And those words that, what do you hear sometimes with, you have to accept it as well, you're just going to have to live with it, right? You're just going to, so from the dialectical point of view, it's not either change or acceptance, it's more of that both and. And when I say acceptance, I don't mean you just have to live with it. I'm saying acceptance as in, this is what is, right? So here you are watching this recording, or with me at this moment, journeying with me, just as you are, right? Just as you feel, just as you are. You're doing things in the world, putting forth best that we can, the things that are important to us, our values, even with our pain and even despite our pain. So that's acceptance. It's how do you show up for things that matter to you, even when pain is still there. And so that's the acceptance part. It's not about accepting some future that you don't know about. It's about accepting just in this moment, how do I show up, even as I am? And then the change part is, at the same time, let's bring in all the strategies that we have to reduce pain and suffering, right? And so how do you hold both of these at the same time is the trick of dialectic. And also with one often comes the other. The more that you do things that you care about, that you engage in things that are meaningful to you, oftentimes that does help reduce the pain and the suffering. And at the same time, you may engage in things so that you feel better. Some people during the mindfulness in the beginning described having the pain go down some or relaxing some. And so in doing that, it might also help you then reach out and do the things that matter to you. And so there's a lot of research and a lot of evidence that both the change approach and the acceptance approach are helpful. And so these are, you probably heard of cognitive behavioral therapy for chronic pain. There's a lot of research around that, and that's very much of a change strategy. It's kind of change your behaviors, change how you sleep, how you move, how you relax, how you breathe, like we did earlier, what you're thinking, and so on. And by doing that, the focus is to try to reduce pain and to increase life function. And then acceptance and commitment therapy is more about focusing on what's important to you, regardless of how you feel internally. And so one way to think about that really easily is right now, maybe imagine you have this really cold, icy bowl of water, and we're going to set up an experiment here, right, using our imaginations. If you want to pull out a bowl of icy water, feel free. You can do that as well. It works too. And so there's two conditions. One is you're going to plunge your hand into that cold water, and it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Because there's going to be a lot of sensation with that icy cold water. And in one condition, everybody here is going to cheer and tell you how fabulous you are and cheer you on to help you keep your hand in there as long as you can and to have it be as unbothersome as possible, right? And so that's one condition. The other condition would be the same thing. You put your hand in the water, but this time it's kind of mean, and I apologize, but the idea would be that people would say perhaps disparaging things, putting you down, telling you how you're unable to do it, and whatever self-talk you probably have that just makes you really glum. And so as you can imagine, research shows that the more that you can bring in that positive talk, being able to, you know, bolster yourself in some ways, you're able to withstand that cold water longer, right? Speaking of water, I'm going to have a quick drink. And so with the focus on CBT, it's really about change in the sense that focuses on let's change the pain itself. And so it's very much focused, whether you're cheering for yourself or putting yourself down, both of those are about, is it working? Well, it's working measured by, am I able to tolerate this pain? Okay, and then acceptance, I'm going to give you another scenario here. I'm going to ask you each to put your hand out like this, okay? And what I have here is I have this really sharp knife, okay? Now put your hand out, okay, everybody? And what I'm going to offer you is if you'd like for me to take my really sharp knife and to cut you with it, go ahead and leave your hand out. Okay, if you're listening, you probably have taken your hand away, right? Because you don't want that. So I have another knife, it turns out, and this knife, it's just as sharp, but you know what? This knife has magical properties. And what this knife is about, take a moment and think about what matters to you most of all, right? What's in your heart, what you care about for the people who you love, for this world that you live in. Think about what your values are and what you want most, okay? Just sit with that for a minute. Breathe into that, right? That deep wish that you care so much about. And now with my magic knife, put your hand out if you're willing to have me take my knife and cut your hand, if it'll help you move closer to that thing you care the most about. right? Now I know my hand goes out. It's like, oh, absolutely, right? I will deal with some pain and some discomfort for things I care much about. And so the difference there between these two approaches is one is focused on bringing down the pain, and the other one is about how do I connect in with my values so that I can engage in what matters, even if I have a lot of pain that goes along with it. And so the dialectic is about holding both of these. I hope that makes sense. Oh, there goes the hand. And so the first concept was about the dialectic, especially holding space for acceptance and change both. And the second point I'd like to make here is about the pain gate. And some of you may have already heard about this, and some of you it might be a new concept. I find it really, really helpful. And so it first came about in the publication more than 50 years ago by Meltzick and Wall, that at first when they published it, nobody paid any attention to it. However, it was paired with some other things, which I'll talk about in a minute, and I got a lot of attention. So years ago, before this research came out, people thought pain was simply a message that came from an injured part directly to the brain. So you touch something hot, and then your sensors in your hand are affected. It travels up to your brain says, oh, that hurts, and then it goes back down and your hand feels it, right? And so that's what we used to think, and it turns out it's not so simple. It's not simply a message that goes from an injury to the brain. Rather, there's this whole pain modulating system. And so in the dorsal horn of the spinal column, there's a neural gate, and it opens and closes depending on a whole host of factors. And this is what the gate looks like. Kidding. And so instead of something traveling directly to the brain, it goes up to this door or this gate, as you can imagine, and then how wide it opens or closes affects how your brain then perceives something. And so one of the things that was really helpful for Meltzick and Wall to get that their theory to be listened to and become such an important one was when they linked it to the experience of phantom limb pain. So here's a case that's really, really clear, right, where there's no tissue damage because somebody may not even have a foot, and yet the foot hurts. And so there's something much more complex that's happening. It's not simply the sensation from a tissue going to the brain. And so I invite you to think about some examples in your own experience where sensation may vary, and sometimes you might code it more as pain or less as pain, even if it's the same example. So I know for me, one time I was moving around fairly quickly in the morning, getting ready for work, and I stubbed my toe. And, you know, I felt it. I felt I stubbed my toe, but I was at the same time just moving through, getting ready for work, you know, taking my shower, getting dressed. And it wasn't until about halfway into the day I realized my toe still hurts. Actually, it hurts a lot. But somehow for all those hours, I didn't even notice it. I noticed it for a moment. It turned out I had broken my toe and I didn't even know it. And so here's some other examples, right? So here's something where if you jumped into this, I'm assuming it's cold, maybe it's hot, I don't know. This man put himself into a place of, some people would say, you know, high physical sensation, maybe discomfort. But in this case, he chose it and he's enjoying it, at least from the picture. So probably you've gotten into, let's say, a really hot tub at some point in your life. And so what happens, just think about that for a moment. What happens when you put your toe in a really hot tub, right? So at first, you know, you realize like, oh, that hurts. So you take your toe out. But most of us, right, we don't then stop and say, well, I'm not going to go into this hot tub because it's hot. We're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, right? And you know what to expect, and you anticipate it, and you experience it based on your understanding of a hot tub and how it'll help relax your muscles. Whereas, like, let's say right now, sitting where you are, if all of a sudden you had that first sensation like a hot tub on your body right in this moment, and not know why, and not have a hot tub right there, you would probably experience it really differently than you would if you knew you were going in a hot tub. You You know, here's an example of sometimes people might want to have a massage that's really hard to the point where it might be even coded as painful, and yet it might be interpreted as being helpful instead. Or, you know, athletes who are running like that, I assume that these runners right now have some burning in their chest as they're running, and they're not thinking, you know what, my chest is burning, I think I need to sit down. Right? But if right now you or I had that same exact experience in our chest, we would code it completely differently. So there's lots of examples of this, right? There's a whole industry around labor to really reclaim what's, you know, a natural sensation, to not necessarily have it be something that needs to be changed. So some examples like that. It's really not just the sensation, but the sensation plus the interpretation that brings us our experience. And so a really helpful question that I work with my clients with is what opens and closes their pain gate. And so what's wonderful about this is there's a lot of legitimacy from scientific research already around this. And at the same time, it's a really empowering metaphor and really easy to adopt. And so this next slide, I summarize a lot of studies that really talk to what affects people's experience of pain as far as opening their pain gate and closing their pain gate. So when your pain gate is open, you feel all of it, right? So that neural gate is wide open, and that sensation just comes all the way in, and you feel it, you know, at a 10 or whatever it might be. Whereas other times your gate might close some. Sometimes it might close all the way. And so here's some, it's a really complex experience or process where there's really a lot of variability in experience based on things you might expect, right? What helps you feel more pain, so to speak? Well, all, you know, stress, anxiety, depression, worrying, not knowing what's going to happen. As I'm saying these things, I'm thinking a whole lot of things about our current pandemic, right? Those are all pain gate openers. Whereas pain gate closers are things that help us feel more connected, help us feel more emotionally regulated, help us relax. Maybe that first opening mindfulness, you may have noticed, you know, I still felt my sensations as I did, but at the same time, my pain gate closed a little bit. And so when you start thinking about your pain gate as always being affected by things that are opening and closing it, it can be kind of helpful in understanding your experience. And to think about that dialectically too, that the goal in our life isn't only to close our pain gate. It's one half of it, right? And the other part is also, how do I engage in things that I care about? And if I'm able to do that in a way where I close my pain gate, that's wonderful. If our whole life was organized around closing our pain gate, which is understandable because when you hurt, you really do want to avoid pain and have it reduced. If I organize, I'll just talk about myself. If I organize my whole life around trying to have no pain, my life would get very, very small. And at the same time, it's really important, and that's the dialectical piece, is being aware of what does open and close our pain gate so that we can have more choice. Okay, and so these are some of the things in research. And you know, I run groups for people who have chronic pain, and every time we start our group, the starter group is in like our first group meeting, we make a list of things for folks that are pain openers and closers. And people often have things like listening to music or certain kinds of music. I mean, just all different kinds of things you can think about that can help you close your pain gate, and also things that will in fact magnify and increase pain. And that list looks very similar to this list, although it can go on and on. And so it's something I invite everybody to do, is to think about what are some of the things that really help you focus more or less on the pain and the experience of it. So it's both how to work with the pain gate and also how to engage in life with whatever's happening in this moment. And a concept I think is really helpful as a kind of an umbrella concept is the idea of distress. And so underneath this umbrella is both the physiological and emotional pain. And that you can think about, you know, things that might be similar or different about each of these. And starting with this question that might seem kind of silly, but it's also really profound. You know, what is an emotion? How do you even know when you're having an emotion? right? Where do you feel it? Yeah, so you might feel it in your body. And that may be something that feels like high intensity, or down, think about it on an axis, it might be more low intensity. And so let's say you're feeling something like excitement. That tends to be more of a high intensity feeling. And then how do you differentiate between something like excitement and, say, fear? Those are both fairly high intensity, a lot of activations happening. The difference is really the valence, or how much you like it and want more of it versus how much you want less of it. So if you're on a roller coaster, people may be feeling the same exact thing. Their heart might be racing, their palms might be sweating, they may be gripping really hard on the seat in front of them, right? And the question of whether it's fear or whether it's excitement has to do with whether you want more of it or whether you want it to stop. And that's about the story you have attached to it. And so in a way, you could think about the difference between an emotion and a sensation, perhaps. Maybe it applies to both of these, is first of all, there's the body piece of it. The somatic piece is where do you feel it? And then also, what's the story you have attached to it? And so when it comes to pain, it's really very similar in that you can have a sensation that's high or low. And then the difference, you think about those pictures I showed earlier, or running or something like that, where there's a burning in the chest. The difference is whether you're thinking, I need it to stop right now. I hate it. It's uncomfortable. It's unpleasant, versus, oh, maybe it's neutral, or this might even feel good. And so what's, I think, helpful about this idea and thinking about both emotions and pain under the same umbrella is it gives us a way to work with them. And so you can work with both, thinking about ways to shift the intensity. So down regulating distress through breath, for example, through relaxation, can bring down the intensity of what you're feeling. And then also being able to play around with, sometimes something that would feel really hot, I might code as being something positive, and other times I think, oh no. And we train ourselves to experience it that way.
Excuse me. I just want to do a little time check. It's 20 to 8.
Perfect.
Allison, do we have a lot of questions in the chat, or should we?
No, we had a lot of responses as we were asking questions, but I would love to hear you keep going.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. So I think it's really important, as I'm saying all this, that I want to emphasize that everything that we feel is in our brain, and it's also absolutely real. And when I give talks to doctors, especially, and other people in the medical field, I emphasize to get rid of this whole notion of, whether something's real or not real, right? Because it's so important to choose your words carefully. And I'm sure, unfortunately, just from my own experience and from working with so many people, I hear again and again and again how invalidating it can be when people don't understand your experience and treat something like it's not real because you can't see it. And this mind-body split, so to speak, is not doing us any service at the same time. It's really much, much more complicated than that. Brains are so interesting, and they're based on predictions, not on that immediate sensory input, because our brain is, I don't know how big my brain is, but it's in this dark box, right? There's only my eyes, these little holes to let the sensory input in. And instead what brains do, and there's this really amazing research that's done actually by my sister-in-law, whose name is Lisa Feldman Barrett, and she's written books and many, many articles on this, and it's informed my work so much in the way that I practice, both as a person in a body and also with my clients, is that understanding what we experience is based on not what is happening, but what our brain is already predicting is going to happen. And I'll give you more of that in a moment. That's just like a little preview. So this overlap between physical and emotional pain is so important. For example, there's research on mice that show that if these two mice share a cage and they snuggle up and they kind of know each other in that way, And one of the mice, and I'm sorry to tell you this because there's cruelty involved. One of the mice is visibly being hurt, and the other mouse is watching. And they both have little mouse MRI machines on them. They see, in fact, the same things light up in the brain because the brain does not differentiate between the distress that happens that's physiological and emotional. I have many more research stories I could tell you, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move ahead because I want to also touch on some strategies. So acceptance is a big piece of it, starting out with validation. It is so important to validate that people's experience makes sense. You are the expert on your own experience. So here's a comic saying you've got to be kidding, your back still hurts, with this individual who's riddled with acupuncture needles. Well, this person knows what they feel like, right? We're experts 24/7 on our experience. And so validation is the idea of conveying that you understand something from somebody else's perspective and that this experience makes sense. And I can't overstate the importance of that. When you're told that your experience does not make sense, you remember it, right? And it's a pain gate opener. Validation is a pain gate closer. Strong, accurately worded validation. So being able to ask for validation and also providing validation for other people. Think about that other mouse that you might live with who knows that you're hurting. They're also having a physiological and emotional response to that, which may come out in lots of different ways. And so validating, you know what? It must be really hard to know that I'm hurting because you love me, and that must be really hard for you, right? Being able to validate reduces that arousal, reduces that distress, helps us regulate, and can bring down the intensity of whatever we feel. And we know this really well because you think about it from the other point of view. When we're invalidated, we're activated, our sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight, goes off. And boy, I know my pain gate goes wide open when that happens. And so activating your parasympathetic nervous system, down-regulating distress, emotional distress, physiological distress, and we can feel our pain gate closing. So what can you always validate? You don't want to validate things that aren't valid. You can always validate people's experience because that's the experience they're having, the emotions or thoughts that arise for them, the importance of things people are suffering, how difficult things are, the wisdom people have in their ultimate goal to feel better or to engage in things that are important to them, and ultimately their ability to meet goals because there's always evidence, right, that we're strong, showing up for things. It's important not to validate things you don't believe. So you can, I give a whole talk on this piece, but I'm just going to let that go and instead leave you with this piece, which I think is really important, is to, if you take away one thing from today, perhaps it's this, is to substitute out the word but with the word and. So if I say to you, you know what, I know you hurt, but anything I say after that, it doesn't even matter because that I know you hurt has gone away. I don't feel believed anymore. I love you, but, right? So what if instead it's, I know you hurt and let's figure out what we can do to help you. And, so always looping in best that you can and rather than but. And that's the dialectic, is to reduce the but and bring in the and. So with acceptance again, it's acceptance of this current moment, best that we can, and alternatives to that really are pain gate openers. So fighting up against it, denying reality, and we're all going to do this sometimes. I still engage in things that will open my pain gate or that fight up against reality. And some of these things are it shouldn't be this way, right? Oh, I only wish, if only, it's not fair. All of these are pain gate openers. The stories or myths we carry around, like if only somebody understood. And I could spend a talk on just that one piece. That is a fight against acceptance because at the moment they don't understand, or they understand in the way they understand. Denial is a way of fighting up against acceptance, giving up and retreating, and all of these can turn pain into suffering. Acceptance practices instead are letting go of that physical fight, right? So when we're fighting up against acceptance, we tend, not even knowing it sometimes, we end up clenching. We end up squeezing our hands, we end up in our minds fighting up against it. It has to be different. And so when we assert our will on something that is not changeable, it just causes so much distress and frustration, physiologically and emotionally, which then opens pain gate. So it's figuring out, how can I be effective with what is, and how do I come back to choose my values, right? Put my hand out because this is important to me, and I'm going to show up and I'm going to give this talk even if I'm uncomfortable, even if such and such and such, because it matters to me, right? Tapping into those values. And so sometimes people can get stuck on, but I just want to feel better, right? And so I invite you just to investigate that a little bit and think, well, what would you do differently if you felt less pain? Then what? And so one of the things then that might be helpful is the concept of, well, let's say if I felt better, I would do X, Y, Z. So what if I decide this is where I want to spend my pain, is doing X, Y, Z, right? So spending time with my family is really important. Doing things to help my community is really important. So these might be places where I think about spending my pain. And so trying to figure out your values, sometimes when we get really mired in, I need to fix the pain, which is understandable, sometimes we start to lose touch, and I've seen this again and again, with what our values are. And so I'm just going to put some things up here, and you can Google and find like lists of values. You know, we may forget some aspects of ourselves that are really important, that are really key to who we are and who we want to be. So I'm going to put up another screen also. And so this list can go on, figuring out, how do I live towards, let's say my one of my values is being honest, or being a person who comes from a place of love. So how do I do this even as I am, just in this moment? So what not accepting reality might look like is getting stuck in that all or nothing, black and white thinking, or I have to be either sick or well. And there's so much that reinforces that in our society. This is not to blame any person who gets stuck in this trap, because it's a very persuasive trap to get in. And so when we get there, we can often give up or think this will never change, which is another trap of not accepting. Emotion examples are dread, hopelessness, giving up. Behavior examples are avoiding things that we care about, being unwilling to try, or powering through no matter what. What does acceptance look like? Well, it's a dialectic. It might be, I might feel like I can't stand this, and I am standing this. And on many things, pain is one part of my experience. I might be more open and curious, be more willing to experiment, to try things, to see what it's like. So these are all examples that I've been showing that have come from working with my clients. So getting myself here just as I am, using a scooter in a grocery store was something that was a big breakthrough for a client of mine. Exercising even for just a really small piece of time, showing up for people you care about, taking breaks. And I remember working with a woman in particular who's coming to mind right now, who told me she is somebody who had trigeminal nerve pain, and she really wanted to show up for her daughter, and it was so hard because she was fighting with her pain. And she started taking little rest breaks and relaxing her face and opening up to her daughter. And she experienced a really dramatic shift in her whole life experience. And I'm just thinking about her and I'm getting a little misty, because it was really something to journey with her on that. And so for each of us, we can think about examples of what's it like when we start accepting and coming from that place. And at the same time, change, right? We want to hold space for that dialectic. So in all the practices that we do to work on closing our pain gate, I want to just put out there, it's really helpful to think about each of these as an experiment. And the more that we can approach them with from a place of curiosity. So if pain gate opens, that's okay. It's data that we can use. It's not a failure. It's more data. And so that's just a way to approach this if you can. There's lots and lots of evidence for different strategies that can be pain gate closing. So I'm just going to leave this up for a moment for you to look at. Some of these you may have tried. Some may open your pain gate, some may close it, some may open and close it at different times. Thinking of ways to adapt some of these things. And self-soothing. For me, just looking at this slide is a pain gate closer. So allowing myself again, as you're watching this, maybe to come back to your breath, maybe picking out one picture here that really speaks to you, if there is one, and allowing yourself to soften, tapping into your senses. Maybe there's something near you you can smell. I have some hand lotion on that's, for me, very much a pain gate closer. Allowing your face to soften. And so anything you do that's soothing can be a way to help yourself feel better, to close your pain gate. And so in sum, the dialectical approach is whatever you can do to close the pain gate, and at the same time, how do you move forward with what is and find that middle path, which opens up new ways of doing things. And then this last piece is, I think, is both really explanatory as far as chronic pain and the way it happens, and also opening up a place of hope in that we're learning more and more over time how plastic our brain is, how much it's capable of changing. And so things get wired together. Brains are really complex. So we look at this picture and I can ask you, what do you see? And so some of you are writing, you see a square. Some of you say, you see Pac-Man? Yeah, okay. Mickey Mouse ears. And so I invite you to just take a moment and look at this picture and see, if you see a square, realize there isn't really a square there. There are no lines that connect the places that would make a full square. And so what happens is, just like with chronic pain, there may be no good reason that the pain that you're experiencing keeps firing and firing again. So what happens is, when we see this picture, we already know what a square is. And so when you see this, your brain can immediately predict that's a white square. And we can figure a way to finish those lines even though they're not really there. And so part of changing how you experience this picture and helping your body also maybe experience differently how you're experiencing sensation is to play around with seeing this picture differently. You're not going to be able to unsee the square. And at the same time, you might see if you can focus on, well, look at those little circles that have a bite out of them, and play around with, can I see those differently? Can I add something else in? And so our brains predict pain because we know it, just like our brain predicts square because we've already seen it. And so one way to change our brain predictions is to expose ourselves to more and more other circumstances. So the more that you engage in things that are pain gate closing, the more that your brain can then remember it's able to have a pain gate closing experience and then predict something different for you going forward. So for example, when I go home, I have a red couch, and that red couch, I know if I lie down on that couch, I'm kind of out for the night, right? Like, I could maybe try to train myself to not associate being out for the night with that red couch, or I might just sit somewhere else. So the more that you, or I might one day come home and start doing something totally different on my couch, you know, having a tea party with my, you know, my kid or whatever it might be. And I might be able to retrain what my experience is, because we have these associations that happen so quickly. It's not that I'm thinking it, it's that my brain is predicting it before it's even happening. So another example of this.
Excuse me, we have only 5 minutes and there are a few questions.
Okay, well, I'm going to skip this part and just go on to, I'll leave this up on the screen for a minute. These are the takeaways, my contact information, and I would love to stop sharing so I can see folks.
Can you give your sister-in-law's name again, please?
Absolutely. It is Lisa Feldman Barrett.
Okay, so we have an Allison Feldman here. I don't know if you noticed that.
type in Lisa Feldman Barrett and the word emotions, you'll find a ton of stuff.
So I
What
have
questions do we
a
have?
question about predicting pain. And I think one of the things that happen when people find themselves out of pain is that they live in fear of the pain starting again, even though there's no indication that the pain will start again. Can you address that and maybe give some suggestions for overcoming that fear?
Okay, so you do a lot in what you just said, and so we can open our pain gate by having these negative predictions, right? In the sense of dread, right? Oh no, oh no, oh no, the pain's going to come back. And so if I live from a place of that, probably pain gate opening, right? Because just think about what your body does when that thought is so front and foremost. And you said something, Anne, about overcoming, I think. And I would say that, I don't overcome my thoughts. I don't know how to do that. However, what I offer for folks is to add in. So to notice and maybe hold loosely. A thought arises, and that's okay. Lots of thoughts will arise all the time. And to notice the thought and invite in some other things also. You don't have, is it a thought that's workable? Is it a thought that's benefiting you? If so, absolutely indulge in that thought. And if it's not, you might, invite in some other things. So just like in this picture, if I go back here, this is a picture that you may not have seen before. This comes also from my sister. There's her, one of her articles at the bottom of the page. You may not have seen this before, but once I do this enough times, I'm going to train you up that you are going to see a bee. Whereas before you saw this bee, you didn't know that that's what you were looking at. And so it's a practice of like, how do I go back to finding whatever I might see there? I see Homer Simpson. I see a snowman. I still see the bee, and that's okay. And that bee is just like that thought of like, okay, the pain's going to come back. Well, that thought's going to be there. And can I also open up to notice, look, there's some flowers outside, and there's just this breath of fresh air, and there's my adorable puppy, and there's whatever else. So kind of opening up to some other experiences at the same time. And that might sound Pollyanna-ish. I also want to say it changes your brain predictions. The more, and my sister-in-law has done tons of research on this, the more that you open yourself to different experiences, the more that your brain will automatically have a wider, more interesting set of predictions it can pull from.
Okay, so I might say something like, yes, I'm afraid the pain will come back, but I have lots of things to do.
So I would say everything you said with one change. What's that change?
And I have lots of things to do?
Yes.
Okay. And I have lots of things to do.
Negates it because it's not an argument. Yep, I have both things. I have this and I have this, and I have thoughts that that everything's a catastrophe, and I have thoughts that everything's lovely, and I have thoughts that my pain might come back, and I have thoughts that my head itches, and I have thoughts that I want to eat a banana. I mean, whatever it is, right? Like and is adding that in, that dialectic.
Okay, and I might also add in, and I have the tools to avoid the pain. I know not to go to my triggers, right?
You can choose that, right? And if you don't choose that, that's okay too.
Okay, so we have another question, and this question says, would your principles work when you're balancing pain while doing verbally demanding work? And for some people with neuropathic facial pain, talking is a trigger. So yeah. So you're doing things that are definitely triggers and definitely induce pain, and you want to go on and do this work.
Yeah, and that's why the dialectic is so important, because right, it's like, so talking hurts and I want to talk, right? So you decide, I'm going to talk some. So maybe you get to decide what feels worth it, right? Where do you want to spend your pain? I might decide who I want to talk to the most, and that's who I'm going to spend my face pain on. I might say, you're face pain worthy, you're less face pain worthy. Sometimes you have to talk to someone who's less face pain worthy, because it's just, there's obligations also.
Right. Okay, and I want to make another comment. When you talked about those cute little mice and their MRIs lighting up, I think of, I happen to be someone whose mom had trigeminal neuralgia and my grandmother too. So growing up as someone who I didn't have it then, I was more their supporter, person who cared for them. If they had ever said something like, and I so appreciate what you're doing for me, and I still want to go out with you today, even though I'll have to wrap my face up in something warm. That would have been such a blessing for me. And I think they didn't know how to do it. So I would urge people to remember those caregivers in your life who are feeling this right along with you.
Mm.
And
And people often think like if somebody really understood what I was going through, it would be different. And at the same time, you think about what if they really did understand what you were going through? That might just feel so hard for them, right? If my partner if my partner hurt the way I hurt, that would break my heart. I would it would devastate me, right? And so you just think about it, it's just more complex than that, right?
yeah. Mhm. Do we have any other questions? Allison, do you see any others?
I think you got to a lot of them. So we just wanted to confirm with everybody that this webinar, we got lots of people wanting to see the slides again and asking about getting the presentation. So the webinar will be posted to the FPA website within about a week and to our YouTube channel. Just call the office if you have any trouble locating it, and we'll be happy to help you. So it takes about a week to do that. And everyone is saying thank you, and so lots of really great comments, just going back to the beginning with the exercise, that there were so many wonderful comments, everyone saying awesome and thanks so much now. But so also that just wanting to let you know, Debbie, because I know you didn't get to see all of those wonderful comments. So thank you so much, Debbie. And it's been really, really different and engaging, and a whole different way of thinking about things, I think, Anne.
I think you're right. And I think you can take this into any part of your life, not only pain. If you're stressed about something at work, how do you balance that stress with, you got to get the job done?
I thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
if people want to reach out to me, my contact information is right there. And I may get back to you, and I may not, because I'm a fallible human who has a lot going on, and I'd really like to get back to you.
Well, we appreciate your time, and
And Debbie's has a chapter in this book. It's an excellent
yay.
chapter, so please look for it. Put it in the middle.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
So how do I get a book?
Let's see, I've got to end the webinar. We'll get you one, Debbie. Just send me your address. Good night.
Yeah, email your address.
Okay.
Great.